Whatever happens, we'll always remember our silver wedding anniversary. Hello, my name is Will, and you've made the life-changing choice to listen to Exploding Helicopter, the world's only podcast celebrating the good, the bad, and the unconvincing way helicopters explode in film. On the morning of June 14th, 1985, TWA Flight 847 was hijacked by members of Hezbollah and Islamic Jihad. The terrorists threatened to kill everyone on board unless 700 prisoners held in Israeli jails were released. The hostage crisis that followed lasted 17 days before the passengers and crew were eventually released, but not before the terrorists murdered an American Navy diver who'd been travelling on the flight. Never slow to exploit the chance to cash in on a fashion, fad, or in this case terrorist outrage, the hucksters at Cannon Films rushed a fictionalised version of events into production. And just 8 months after the hijacking, the film we're looking at on this show, The Delta Force, exploded into cinemas. So, as we're talking about a film where people are forced to act against their will, it's rather appropriate that my guest today is a man I regularly have to blackmail into appearing on this show. With me once again, under pain of death, is my good friend Dara. How you doing, buddy?
Hello, everybody. Yes, I've been allowed out of my jail cell specifically for this podcast. Please send funds for my release. I've got to get out of here.
What our listeners can't see is I've currently got a gun to your head to ensure your participation through to the very bitter end of this show.
This is life imitating art right here.
But this show is a pretty special episode. It's actually our 50th Exploding Helicopter show. So, Dara, I wondered what you made of us reaching this incredible landmark.
I can't believe I've been around so long. It's really kind of the first thoughts that coming into my head. 50 podcasts is quite, it's a lot of time and a lot of effort. I hope people out there have enjoyed it. As I say, let's be honest. Let's kind of break the fourth wall. Will is the main force. He does so much work to put these things together. I just rock up, glass of wine in hand, a few notes, and, I suppose that the talent, doesn't have to work as hard as the kind of, the engine room. That's fair to say, I suppose.
I'm beginning to regret ever getting you involved in this. But most people, I guess, would have assumed that this show would have died a natural death by now. So I'm really sorry that 2 years and 50 shows later, I have to keep coming back to you.
It's amazing if you think about it. When this whole thing was created, this crazy idea, late night, probably after a few pints, the idea to come ahead with this, Will, that we'll be doing this long, into the future. And there's still films to do. And this is something that could potentially run or until I get that release from jail.
You may wish for a way out of this particular hostage
an easy
crisis.
Death, yeah, smooth death.
I'm of the cruel and sadistic school of villainy, so I'm going to be drawing out this your slow death for a good while. But
okay, all right then, okay, that's fine. That's the way it's going to be.
But because this is our 50th show, I thought I'd choose an important film in the Exploding Helicopter canon, and I think I've done that with Delta Force because this film gets to its exploding helicopter quicker than any other movie. So did you think I picked a good one?
I actually laughed. I lolled. I actually lolled because first frame is just an helicopter on the ground exploding. I'm like, what the hell is going on here? This is if for Exploding Helicopter fans, this is probably this is the money shot right at the beginning, and it's a cigarette all the way through the next 2 hours.
Well, I don't think we should tease our listeners any longer. I think it's time to greenlight our mission to review the Delta Force. But before we do that, let's listen to Trailer Man give us a testosterone-fueled introduction to the film.
It's a new age of terror that requires a new breed of warrior.
1 minute to showtime.
We're members of Delta Force and we're here to take you home.
America's elite anti-terrorist commandos, committed to destroy the enemies of freedom, because the stakes are more than pride.
Sleep tight, sucker.
More than honor.
Move it.
More than justice.
American, I want to negotiate. Do you hear me, American?
Loud and clear.
Because they're fighting to save American lives. The Delta Force, starring Chuck Norris and Lee Marvin, America's new heroes. The Delta Force.
The Delta Force was released in 1986. It stars Chuck Norris as Major Scott McCoy, an ex-Special Forces soldier who'd quit the army in disgust after pencil-pushing Washington bureaucrats fouled up one of his missions. Years later, Chuck is called back into action when Arab terrorists hijack a jumbo jet carrying American citizens. The hostage situation escalates when a number of the passengers are taken off the plane and become prisoners at the terrorists' secret compound. With no hope of resolving the situation peacefully, Norris and his men are ordered to storm the plane and the terrorists' hideout to free the hostages. The Delta Force has a rather star-studded cast, so alongside Chuck Norris we have Lee Marvin and Robert Vaughn as members of the American military. And we also have no fewer than 3 Oscar winners among the hostages on the plane: Shelley Winters, Martin Balsam, and the great George Kennedy. While as the main terrorist Abdul, we have the decidedly non-Arabic Robert Forster. The film was directed by none other than Menahem Golan, the legendary boss of Cannon Films. The Delta Force has a 5.6 rating on IMDb. Audiences rate it as 59% on Rotten Tomatoes. Some of the reviews for this movie: Roger Ebert gave the film a positive review, describing it as taut and exciting. He did.
Wow.
He did indeed.
Okay.
While Vincent Canby at the New York Times called it wildly fanciful chauvinist fiction. So, Dara, was it taut and exciting, or was it chauvinist fiction?
Oh, these reviews are fantastic. You know what? 59% is pretty much got it on the money for me, because there's a lot to kind of be enjoyed in the film, but there's a lot of ridiculousness. This is a very 80s film. It kind of tapped into the zeitgeist of that mid-80s paranoia about Russia, communism, terrorists, all the bad guys attacking the US, kind of following in the... It's basically, I would say, a poor man's Rambo, this is. Obviously, Rambo acted alone. You've got the Delta Force, but it's pretty much one man. It's Chuck Norris doing what Chuck Norris does, smashing up the bad guys. It was just a funny one, because on initial viewing, I was kind of like, this is okay. It's a bit ludicrous. But the more I've kind of looked into it, the attention to detail that the scriptwriters have done with the plot lines, and I was quite surprised that this is obviously based on the real hijacking of the TWA flight in 1985, and they have got so many details down to the exact, copied exactly from the events. Because you look at the film, you think this is ludicrous. How can this happen? How can that happen? A lot of these things actually happen for real life.
Exactly, and that was my experience of watching the film as well, because there's these, as you say, sort of rather ludicrous moments during the film, and then you find out actually that's what happened in real life. So at the beginning of the film, you see the plane being hijacked by 2 terrorists. It then lands in Algiers, I think it is, where additional terrorists then come on board. And, I remember watching that sequence and just thinking, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, how on earth? Yeah, exactly.
But that actually happened.
Yeah, like a cleaner comes into pretends that he's fixing the toilet window or something, brings in a couple of hand grenades and guns, just puts them in the waste disposal area, or where the handkerchiefs are, and just walks out again. And say, yeah, that's fine, your toilet's fixed. Or you travel to another airport and there's no security perimeter around the fence, and people just bundle onto the plane whenever they want and nobody stops them. But this is what it was like to travel in the 80s. People who moan about putting their belts in the metal detectors and taking their shoes off, have a think for a second about what it used to be like.
But going back to the film sort of overall, I I enjoyed it, but it's an odd beast of a film, I think, because it's part men on a mission movie, it's part sort of The Dirty Dozen, but it's also part airplane disaster movie, and I was very much reminded of the Airport franchise of films. And,
absolutely. Especially because what's his name?
George Kennedy?
George Kennedy's in it. So George Kennedy's in this, and is George Kennedy in Airplane 2?
He's
in the first
He's in all of the airport movies.
Yeah, so they're on there, and there's a bunch of nuns on there, just like there is in Airplane. I was expecting one of them to start speaking jive to one of the other passengers. It is, as I thought, it was a bit of a joke at the beginning, but I think there's only probably so many ways that you can format a scene inside a plane, and obviously the sort of template is Airplane, because we've seen that so many times. So it does ape that quite a lot. It's quite you don't know which way the film's going to go when you see those scenes.
So as you have mentioned, terrorists were one of the, well, I guess they're still a staple of movie bad guydom even today. But the terrorists in this movie, what did you think of their portrayal?
Well, I suppose it's hard to, it'd be quite, this is controversial, but it'd be quite good to see a sympathetic film about terrorism. Because obviously terrorists are just the bad guys, like evil incarnate, but you have to think that there's motivation for why certain people do certain things. Obviously, in the West, we see it in one way. Obviously, you can never condone killing people. You can never condone, breaking the law, those kind of things. But some of these people are very, very desperate. I mean, without getting too much into the politics of Hezbollah circa 1980, there was a lot of, you could argue there was a lot of Israeli action towards and US action towards their communities, and they felt that they had no voice, and this was a way that they could, there was kind of it was the thing to hijack planes to get your voice heard back in the 80s when it was easy to do. So a lot of people thought that this was, a platform to air their grievances. So obviously you don't see any of that in this film. It's not that sort of film, but the terrorists are presenting the typical 80s, sweaty, furtive looks.
They are very sweaty.
Very sweaty.
They're amongst the sweatiest villains I've ever seen.
Very, very poor aircon in those TWO flights in the 80s. All beardy, the usual sort of stuff. I mean, in the real story, apparently, because I was reading a Time article today about it, that in the initial capture of the plane, there was only 2 people versus 150 passengers. And one of the terrorists was very, very angry, hitting people over the head with guns, a complete lunatic. But the other one was very calm and was actually quite nice with the passengers. I think there's like one scene in this one where one of the terrorists at the beginning actually gives a doll to a young child and remembers how he had a 6-year-old.
There's another moment like that in the film, and I don't think the film does a particularly good job of communicating a message at that particular moment, because the terrorist who has the big bushy beard and who's uber sweaty and boggle-eyed. He's not Robert Forster. I don't know who the actor's name. Yeah. The other one is. He pistol whips 2 stewardesses, and then a little bit later he helps a pregnant lady.
Yeah,
now,
it's bonkers, isn't it? Completely out of character.
Now, if you had one character helping the pregnant lady and then the other character being ultra violent, then it would make sense. Exactly. And speaks to that point that you were just making. But here they just give all of that to that one character, and it just makes him seem really schizophrenic. So you're just thinking, well, one minute they're making him a villain, the next minute they're trying to humanize him. So what on earth are they trying to say?
Let's be honest. I don't know whether this is one of those films that had lots of drama. I think it was, as you quite clearly mentioned at the beginning, it was kind of almost like a rushed film. They did really well in the time they had to sort of get everything together. But obviously, then these are sort of things that make a film. These little details, character arcs, or, like motivations and stuff. This is a canon film. I have less experience of these than you will. I think this is probably your kind of area of expertise. But I get the feeling that they're not too keen on those kind of things. It's more about explosions and, shooting the bad guys. And that's what they're really going for.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that canon movies are not as interested in the craft of filmmaking or the craft of storytelling as they are in putting blood, guns, violence and sex in your face on the screen. Yeah. So I think that's their primary interest here. But Dara, I know you're quite partial to a loud shirt and some eye-catching fashions. I was particularly taken by the Tony Montana style outfit that Robert Forster was wearing in this movie.
It was fantastic. So for anyone who's not seen this film, Robert Forster rocks up at the airport wearing, I think, something out of cross between Tony Montana and Saturday Night Fever. Like a pure white suit with a red shirt, massive mirrored shades. If that person walked into your airport, you'd think terrorist for sure. He had terrorist written all over him. Such was his ridiculous clothing.
Terrorist or nightclub, I think that would be,
shady character, let's say. Whether the real terrorist dressed like that, who's to say? But they did use. I don't know how much they got into that, but there's a really good shot which I've seen on Google Images of the hijacker with a gun to the head of the pilot as he's speaking to press as they
Yes.
touch down. I think it's in Algiers or Lebanon for the second time, and it's literally identical. So they have taken some time to look in, mirror the real life story. I don't know whether the sartorial choices are quite the same as well.
Well, let's have a quick look at the passengers on board this film, and it's a very eclectic mix of passengers here. So we've got nuns, we've got a Catholic priest, there's a pregnant lady, there's the obligatory small child, there's even a couple of Holocaust survivors here, and
Yes.
it's a real disaster movie cross-section of passengers.
Yeah, they've got obviously. I think you mentioned Shelley Winters, who a lot of people will be familiar with. So she's one of the Jewish passengers on the plane, and one of the big things that happened in the real story is that the hijackers actually asked for all the passports of the passengers to be given to them, so they could look through. And one of the stewardesses was supposed to go through them and pick out all the passengers with Jewish names, because obviously this is a very well planned hijacking, and what they planned to do was to take all the Jewish who they deemed to be Jewish prisoners away and have them as almost like a siege within a siege, and have them hold up as prisoners separately. So they took them off the plane, and they had them imprisoned in a prison in Lebanon. So that was part of so Shelley Winters is one of the Jewish passengers, but this is an Israeli funded film, and the kind of Holocaust Jewish element is writ very heavy, especially in the opening scenes. Is the director actually Israeli?
He is, yes.
Okay. And it's funded in Israel. So there's obviously they've got an angle which they want to look at this film, and ultimately it's about terrorists. So I completely get the logic.
It does really smack you in the face, but then, like you, doing the research into the events that inspired this film, you sort of find out what that actually happened. And I remember when I was watching the film, I was thinking they're really troweling this on a bit thick.
Yeah, exactly.
But it did happen. So
It did happen.
you sort of maybe it could have been, well, to be honest, maybe the whole film could have been presented in a slightly different way. It's not subtle filmmaking that we're talking about here, but it is interesting to be aware of the events that inspired this film, because it does change how you view some of the things that you're watching.
Exactly. I mean, some of the stuff is so ridiculous, you think this can't have happened. Then when you actually read the story, some of these things did happen, and it almost seems like a different world to the world we live in today. Going back to the actors as passengers, obviously I quite enjoy George Kennedy in it. He's a very kind of charismatic actor.
Oh yeah.
And he plays the part of an Irish priest who isn't Jewish, but to back up the people that have been taken away to be imprisoned or tortured. He doesn't know at this stage. He basically kind of says, if they have to go, I'll go as well. As a man of God, he's kind of doing the virtuous thing. I quite liked his performance. He doesn't have a lot of airtime, but I quite like his performance in it. He's a solid character.
Well, the thing that really struck me about this film was that it has no fewer than 4 Oscar winners in it. So you've got Lee Marvin, who won an Oscar for Cat Ballou. You've got George Kennedy. You've got Shelley Winters, who actually won 2 Oscars, and Martin Balsam. And I was just thinking, blimey, when you hear about a film having 4 Oscar-winning actors in it, I guess you have certain assumptions about the quality of the film that you're probably going to be watching. And I wondered if there surely can be no other film of the Delta Force's ilk which features 4 Oscar winners.
That's a very good point, actually, Will. I think the budget was reasonably high, but you wouldn't expect a massive budget for this sort of film. And obviously these are actors their career is kind of on the downslope, even though they are good actors. They don't really have a lot to get their teeth into. It's not that sort of film. Yeah, you're quite right. I mean, it is for that sort of film. These high, caliber of actors, you are surprised to see them in there.
Let's move on to talk about the stars of this film, I guess, the Delta Force themselves, and they're meant to be the heroes of this film. They're meant to be this elite special force unit brought in to kick the terrorists' butt. But I was rather bemused by quite a lot of their portrayal in this movie, because they really do, rack up quite a few bungling moments. I don't know what you thought.
Well, at one point right at the beginning, where we see the helicopter blowing up, is I know we mentioned, but it's alluding to sort of a bungled raid, 5 years before, and it's the sort of bungled raid that Chuck's had enough of. He's had enough of the politicians making silly decisions and getting them into trouble, so he retires. But there's a helicopter basically that's just about to blow up, and it's in the middle of a desert, and all the Delta Force people are just running by it saying, no, it's about to blow up in a minute. We can't get that guy out. Impossible. So all Chuck does is just go in there, lift the thing up, get the guy out in like literally 30 seconds. You think, if these are what's the whole thing about not leaving any of your men behind? They just buzz off back to the plane and say, it's about to explode. Don't go in there. And that's quite poor. You do see scenes where there's one particular scene where I think they're in a sewer event, and the idea they got plans to go through the sewer, through the sea in scuba diving gear, and then pop up in the compound inside the prison to rescue the prisoners. And literally they just pop their heads, they just move the manhole cover, pop their heads up without a telescopic camera or anything, just to check who's there. There's terrorists who are sort of about within 5 meters. Luckily they always portray these terrorists who are doing their night round. They're just asking about, they're half asleep or they're having a cigarette. No, never paying attention. So they obviously don't see them pop out, and about 50 of them just come out of this manhole cover, and no one seems to know that they're there. Yeah, they're not great, are they? They're not the elite.
They're certainly not. And I think for me, the one moment that I just thought was just the most spectacular botch job was where they sort of about a third of the way through the film, the Delta Force go to storm the plane and free the hostages. And just before this happens, one of the hostages has actually been freed from the plane. So Lee Marvin orders the go ahead of this raid, and then thinks, oh, you know what? Maybe I'll have a quick chat with that passenger who just came off and just see, what the situation on the plane is, how many terrorists there are. And, he, as this raid is going ahead, he starts having a chat with her and discovers that sort of like an additional dozen terrorists have sneaked on board the plane, and that rather than 2 of them, there's now about 14 of them. And he has to then sort of race down the runway to call off the raid. And I just thought,
how much intelligence has gone into this particular, Oh, what? How do you base your 2-person? We base it on a calculated guess. Okay, that's fine. We'll go in there anyway. Yes, completely.
I guess their blood was up. I guess they just wanted to just get on with the job.
And I'm not being funny. Lee Marvin, Oscar winner or not, I don't know how. I think this was his last film role. And to be fair to him, you wouldn't be surprised to sort of see him in a Zimmer frame, kind of trotting around. He looks a bit old, and like as the leader of an elite military force, actually going. He's not like he's sitting in a compound just giving orders. He's got a gun and he's going around trying to shoot people. He's way past it in this film. It's completely implausible, I'm afraid.
He really doesn't look too well in this movie.
Him.
I think he did appear in one film that came out after the Delta Force, but
really?
He died pretty soon after this film came out, and he doesn't look a well man. He doesn't look like he's got, I guess it's probably to do with his health, but he doesn't look too enthusiastic about this movie. That could be down to his health, or it could be just down to the fact that he knows what the script looks like. But we did get one very interesting scene with Lee Marvin at the beginning of the film, where we first come across his character sitting in a bar, and he's about 70, and he's making what is possibly the most half-hearted attempt to chat up a barmaid I've ever seen.
I remember that. Yeah, she's like a really nice young barmaid, and it's like, oh god, I can't be. No one's going to take this seriously who's watching this film, but I'm going to have to say these words anyway. Thank God the phone rings and he has to do something else. Because can you imagine him actually, going ahead with whatever he had planned in the script?
So, obviously, Delta Force is an action movie. What did you make of the action that we get to see in this movie?
Some bits are quite good. I quite liked some of the chase scenes in. There's a pretty good bit like the Italian Job where there's they're in like a van bouncing down steps and going through back alleys when they're being chased by the terrorists and they're getting shot at. I quite like that. It's going to look quite real. It reminded me a little bit of the French Connection. The second one where they're in Marseille going around the back alleys is quite gritty, quite real. It looked quite good. No, quite impressed with that. Yeah, some good explosions in there. And then they kind of, Rambo, I'm sure came out before this one, the Rambo 2. And then they just go ridiculous. Things like Chuck Norris zip lining down a wire with an Uzi shooting people as he goes down. I mean, it's great.
Did you enjoy his motorbike loaded with rockets?
Rockets.
Standard issue in the American Army.
Apparently, like, I think it was Suzuki. They actually made that bike specially for him. I looked this up. They actually mocked these bikes up, made real bikes that shoot. They're obviously not rockets, but could shoot something out. And they gave them to the production company afterwards, like a promotional thing. And obviously he had like rockets. Like there's a payoff bit at the end where I don't want to ruin it for anyone who hasn't seen this film, but there's kind of a scene at the end where Chuck confronts Forster, the main henchman, in like a shack and beats him to a pulp basically, and he kind of leaves him in a car, and then he goes off on his motorbike for no reason, even though the guy's still alive. And then he looks back and he's got a gun pointed at him, and he just presses a button, and these rockets shoot out the back of the motorbike and blow the car up with Forster inside. It's completely ridiculous.
So, if I set up a search on eBay for one of these motorcycles, would you be willing to throw in with me? See if we can get hold of one of these unique machines?
Well, apparently it went back to Israel, was used and was kept by the studio, so it exists somewhere. Maybe someone, maybe a massive Chuck Norris fan has already bought it on auction. It might be quite expensive, Will. The funds we get through Exploding Helicopter really are meagre. That's why I'm still in prison. Make that clear.
Well, I might do a bit of lazy Googling later, see if I can find one that is for sale. But
I mean, the action here, I mean, some bits were good, but a lot of it had a very strong A-Team vibe. I don't know if you got that. The bits like in the compound, it really kind of smacked of A-Team a little bit.
Although the one difference with the A-Team is that here people actually died and actually got hit by the machine gun fire.
That is
obviously
true.
Very different to the A-Team.
But did you notice, we talked about the ineptitude of the Delta Force and how ridiculous they were, and yet bullets were firing off left, right, and centre. How many Delta Force got shot? One. It's completely ludicrous, and it kind of ties in with the chest-beating American jingoism, like the Delta Force, they're so good, bullets just ricochet off them and don't get shot. This isn't a film for people who want to see the realities of war. Let's put it like that.
Well, I think no moment better illustrates that than the final frames of this movie, which show all of the passengers being flown to safety along with the Delta Force, and they're all drinking Budweisers and singing the American national anthem. Doesn't get more stars and stripes than that.
Exactly. That's a great movie tie-in. I mean, you see Budweiser prominently sitting on someone's desk earlier in the film as well. Clever, these guys. This is one way to get your film funded, is get some of the big boys in play.
I think being freed by terrorists is about the only occasion I would ever deign to drink a Budweiser. Generally, I'd prefer a different, a European lager, yeah.
Yeah, something more classy.
Okay, I think it's time to get this party started and talk about the exploding helicopter action. But before we do that...
Hello, you lot. I'm Daryl.
And I'm Ben.
And we're Sudden Double Deep, the Triple Bill title podcast. Each fortnight, we watch 3 films linked by a word in the title. For example,
Sudden Impact, Double Impact, and Deep Impact.
Or
Young Frankenstein, Young Guns, and While We're Young.
Or
4 Flies on Grey Velvet, Blue Velvet, and Velvet Goldmine.
You get the idea. If you're into finding links between weird triple bills, taking pot shots at terrible movies, and listening to 2 film fanatics bicker, then we've the show for you. Search for Sudden Double Deep on iTunes, Stitcher, and all good podcatchers, and find us on Twitter at SDD Film Podcast. That's SDD Film Podcast. Thank you very much.
Sorry, it's me again. This, though, is the part of the show where we talk about cinema's greatest movie trope, the exploding helicopter. Now, steady yourself, because this is a stunning job of fireball. It is, incredibly, the very first event of the film. It's true, Delta Force opens with a shot of a stationary helicopter in an empty, barren desert. For a few seconds, nothing happens. Then the helicopter suddenly explodes. No exposition, no explanation, no introduction. 1 minute it's there, the next it's gone, blown to smithereens. It's dramatic, it's unexpected, it's unbelievable. Dara, what did you make of it?
Well, there's a mix of shock and laughter, really, when I saw it. Because, as you say, it just explodes. It's literally the first thing you see after the credits roll. It's an exploding helicopter, which is obviously why we're all here. And that's fantastic. but there's no missile, there's no explanation. There's like, what's this happened? Why is this happening? And you don't really get more of an explanation even as the film carries on. You presume, I suppose, it's been downed by one of the terrorists in a previous mission to the hijacking, but you just don't know why. And obviously, one of the joys
of the exploding helicopter is seeing the method of destruction.
Exactly, we're robbed of that, and it's such a quick scene as well. It's almost blink and you miss it. It's literally the first. I can't stress this to viewers enough. It is bananas. I've never seen or heard of a film. I mean, we know one of the cardinal rules of exploding helicopter filmmaking is you keep the exploding helicopter towards the end of the film as a kind of the payoff. You build up to it. Rank up the tension. There's the preamble. There's the kind of jeopardy as it's flying around the sky. Will it crash? Will it not? And then it crashes, and then you see the aftermath. You get none of that. You get none of the aftermath. You get none of the explanation, and you just kind of see the wreckage in flames for a bit until it actually blows up, which is a decent explosion, probably a real explosion, I'd say. Would you say, Will?
Yeah, I think so. It looks. I think it might be a model, though. I don't think it's. I don't think it's like a life-size model. I think it's some sort of reduced scale model. But generally, I think it's fair to say we like to see our sort of exploding helicopters incorporated into the film's finale. That feels to us as fans of as the genre where the chopper fireball should be. And as exciting as it is to see a film begin with an exploding helicopter, I perhaps think that exploding helicopters, Dara, they're a bit like making love to a beautiful woman.
I knew this was coming. You beat me to it. I was going to say it's so much like your love life, Will. One shot and it's all gone. But
yeah, I mean, you need to seduce a woman. You need to romance a woman. You don't just take her to a cheap motel on the first date and blow your wad within the first 30 seconds.
Exactly. How is that the basis of a relationship? It just isn't.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can place this film into perspective. It's great that somebody has gone out there and decided to make the bold decision of, I'm going to start my film with an exploding helicopter. It's a hell of a statement of intent. But,
very true.
It's been done. I enjoyed seeing it for somebody being that bold and brave. But I think generally other filmmakers don't need to be taking this as a how-to guide.
Exactly. It's like viewing a car crash when you're driving. There is a bizarre fascination, but you realise it's wrong and you shouldn't be doing it.
Okay, I think it's just about time to wrap up our discussion of the Delta Force. Dara, I'm prepared to release your family unharmed, so thanks for joining me once again.
Praise Allah. Allah is great.
Just a few things from me. Check out the website, explodinghelicopter.com. Leave us a review on iTunes, give us a retweet or shout out on Facebook. Help spread the word about what we do. We'll be back soon, but until then, keep watching the skies for those exploding helicopters.
This podcast is a proud member of the Lamb Podcasting Network. Find the network at largeassmovieblogs.com.
They're making a mistake. They're making a mistake.
Mr. Rozovsky, you move or I shoot you right here.
Oh, but I am not Jewish. I'm an American. I came from Russia, but now I live in America. I am Christian Orthodox. Ask them. Sister, tell him I am not a Jew. Father, don't you know me from Chicago?
Move!
I am not a...
Wait, this man is telling the truth.
You sit down, we know what we are doing.
Sir, you're making a big mistake.
Sit down.
Sit down.
On the floor.
Sit down. Sit down.
No.
You sit down. We know what we are doing.
Father, where are you going?
You! Come back!
No!
Come back!
No!
Come back! I said come back!
No!
Sit down!
What are you doing here?
You call me.
What is your name?
William O'Malley.
I did not call you.
You call for all the Jews. I'm Jewish, just like Jesus Christ. You take one of us, you gotta take us all.